Hello, my name is Agnieszka Pikulicka-Wilczewska and this is Turan Tales, a podcast about Central Asia. It delves into stories of people, politics, social change and more, and is part of my newsletter which you can support on Substack. Welcome and be my guest in the journey to Central Asia. Hi listeners! This week on Turan Tales, we're looking into a fascinating and often misunderstood topic: witchcraft, clairvoyance, fortune-telling, and other spiritual practices that are popular in Central Asia and among Central Asians abroad. These are practices that many of you may have never heard of. We're talking about this now because in July this year, Tajikistan amended its administrative code to include a new clause against the use of services provided by sorcerers, magicians, and fortune-tellers. Under the new rule, anyone who consults or pays for such services can be fined. For the practitioners themselves, the laws are even stricter. Repeat offenders can face prison sentences of up to 2 years. The authorities claim that these tough measures are meant to combat superstition and protect citizens from fraud. But critics argue that such policies are yet another way for the government to exert greater control over the population. To explore the fascinating world of Central Asian spiritual practitioners, I'm joined by Dr Anna Cieślewska, a social anthropologist and orientalist at the Institute of Ethnology and Cultural Anthropology at the University of Łódź in Poland. Over the past 19 years, she has carried out extensive research and development projects across Central Asia, the Russian Federation, the South Caucasus, and the Middle East. Her research among Central Asian communities, both in the region and in exile, has focused on informal spiritual and religious practices, socioeconomic development, migration to Russia and the EU, and the intersection of Islam with local cultural traditions. She's also the author of Islam with a Female Face: How Women Are Changing the Religious Landscape in Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, which makes her the perfect guest for today's episode. Welcome to Turan Talks. Hey Anna!
Hi,
Thank you so much for accepting my invitation.
thanks a lot for inviting me.
Today we're going to talk about witchcraft, fortune-telling and sorcery in Tajikistan and Central Asia in general. So can you tell us how popular is witchcraft in Tajikistan and Central Asia? Is it popular among Central Asian communities?
We can say that it's a very popular in Central Asia, in Tajikistan, but it's of course there are different places where these kind of services are performed, and it's depending from the circle. For example, why I don't want to say that it's so popular among all people? Because there are two groups of people who consider those kind of practices as something not very appropriate. First group of people, they are kind of, in inverted comma, secular Muslims, usually educated from big cities, who believe that those kind of practices are sign of backwardness, they are old, they are not necessary. There's something which they are sometimes even ashamed of. There's a first group of people. The second group of people, paradoxically, they are very religious people, let's say modernist Muslims, who believe that those kind of practices contradict Quran, contradict Islam. So that is why, answer for your question, yes, they are popular, but obviously, not everybody performs them.
So, who is using the services of fortune tellers, clairvoyants? Who are these people who believe in these kind of practices?
For example, from my experience, it's a very popular from people from the village, but from people from the cities as well. I conducted research in a big city in Tajikistan, Hujamp, and there it was very popular. However, in Isfara, very religious region, they were popular, but also many people, they refused them. Dushanbe, mixed of different kind of people, newcomers, old people, people who are living in Dushanbe many years, different, situations. Some people believe, some not. But also, I conducted research among migrants in Moscow, and there, among some people, those practices are very popular, I mean.
Okay, so what kind of services exactly are the most popular? Can we maybe divide these practices into kind of different types, especially when it comes to Tajikistan?
Yes, of course. We can divide those practices into the different types. And also we have different kind of, let's say, spiritual professionals. To begin with, fortune telling, we have a profession which is called Folbin, like a fortune teller, clairvoyant. Folbin is a person, literally the meaning of Folbin is to see the future. Okay, this is a person who is seeing the future, and this kind of, like a service of seeing the future is performed in a very different way. I will describe in a while in which way. In Kyrgyzstan, you have people who are called also differently, but let's say Kazakhchi, and in Kazakhstan, and they perform fortune telling, but through casting the stones. Usually they have 41 stones, and through the stones, they see the future. There are people who are called in Tajikistan kinachi. They remove bad spirit, like an evil eye, and there are kind of, let's say, lower rank professionals. Kina literally mean like envy, hatred, something like that. So removing something which is bad, but it's not very serious, okay? Almost everywhere. I mean, removing kina, this is like a very popular practice. Even people who are not kinachi, they can remove kina if they somehow, they believe that they have some abilities, they can do it, no? There are also people who are called tabib, like folk doctors. They use different kind of techniques. They can also, I think they can also like predict future. They can perform fortune telling, but they also heal people in a different way. There are people who are called, that is very serious profession, like an exorcist. They are doing exorcism, so they are removing jinns, very serious evil spirit. And there are also many kinds of those people. There are people who are religious in terms that they follow strictly Quran, removing those jinns, evil spirits, through reading certain surahs. But also there's very interesting profession which is called Kasidahon, Azanihon, Polchi, depending on the region of Central Asia. Kasidahon is a really very rare profession. They remove those evil spirits, expelling jinns through reading Kasidanoma. Kasidanoma, special book with special kind of magical kasidas. It was in the past. Now I think that this may be not a few, but few Kasidahons are in Tajikistan. And traditionally, among Kazakh, among Kyrgyz, they were Bakhshi, shamans, people who were considered shamans. But in fact, however, those kind of, professions sometimes are mixed, And nowadays we have different fusions of those professions. For example, I came across a lady who called herself Bakhshi. She was living in a Voruch. Voruch is an enclave within Kyrgyzstan, but it's a Tajik enclave belonging to Tajikistan. And this lady, she performed like a fortune telling by using tasbih, Muslim rosary, okay? And in this way, she performed fortune telling. So we have very diverse environment for those kind of professionals, spiritual professionals, as I call them, in Central Asia.
If we can look at the region as sociologists, what are the reasons why people turn to this kind of professionals, and in which countries or in which areas they are the most popular?
The reasons are, first of all, I think there's a culture, tradition. It's a very rooted within the culture. And we have to remember that traditionally, those kind of abilities, they were heritated within families from generation to generation. In Tajikistan, you're supposed to have a nasiba. Nasiba is a gift, and nasiba is heritated. People believe that it's something which is just, impose on you, even impose, not heritated, but impose on you, and you should follow your destiny. Because if you refused, you can be sick, you can die. Something can happen with your family, and it's very typical for a kind of let's say shamanic traditions. Because among Bakshi, among shamans, among different kind of healers in Central Asia, nasiba, like this gift, was usually has been imposed. I know those kind of people who told me that, okay, I could not refuse, because if I refuse, they will kill me, my ancestors, my spirit. I have to now perform this healing. So very deep rooted reason is a cultural reason. But, practical thing, there are obviously, I think as far as Tajikistan is concerned, also Kyrgyzstan, migrant circles in Moscow, which I observe, simply poverty very often. Very often poverty, lack of access to proper medical care. However, also rich people use those services. Sometimes people mix, they go to normal medical doctor, and they also go to healer. Or, for example, they try treatment for many years, it doesn't work, so they turn to healer. I can quote an example from my recent research, not from Central Asia, but very similar among Azerbaijanis in Georgia. I heard a story just 3 weeks ago. I have a holy place which I research. There is a tomb of Sayyid Abbas, holy person, who is buried there, and his great-grandson is still guarding this place. And I came 3 weeks ago to say hello to him, just, for 10 minutes, and he told me, very, very good that you come, because we just performed Kurban. You know what's happened? My far relatives, they tried to have a baby many, many years, and didn't work. They were about 40, they visited all medical doctors available, of course, in Moscow, in Georgia, did not help. So they came here to this ziyarah, to this holy place. This lady slept next to the tomb of Sayyid Abbas, and Sayyid Abbas appeared in her dream, giving her water and bread. She consumed those things, and after some time she delivered twins. That is why today they came to do Kurban, to sacrifice animal, to thank God and thank also Sayyid Abbas. So if you ask me, about this, what is the reason? The reasons also are very complex. But for example, among migrants, it's obvious very often, not even in traditional healing, but a kind of modern Muslim healing as a hijama, which is cupping therapy. I mean, this is like, they are very special cups, which are put into the body of someone, and they are sucking blood, and in this way the body is supposed to be purified from disease, this is kind of healing. Very popular among migrants in Moscow, very popular in Uzbekistan, in Tajikistan, now in Kyrgyzstan, in Kazakhstan, also in some circles. Because of sometimes circumstances, simply people don't have money for proper treatment, and they are turned to hijama.
You mentioned your fieldwork in Russia, in Moscow, which is extremely interesting. Can you tell us what exactly it looks like? In what areas of Moscow these kind of practices are present? What kind of circles are, performing these kind of practices?
To begin with, for example, fortune telling, there are different kinds of specializations and groups. For example, there are Luli gypsy from Central Asia. Those Luli who I met in Moscow, they were from Samarkand, and they were working in a central mosque in Moscow. I mean, around Moscow, of course, not in the mosque. They perform fortune telling. They also remove some evil spirit, in a different way. Those Luli also were working in Ciepłystan. Ciepłystan is a big marketplace. There are other people, of course, also working on the places like Ciepłystan or next to mosque, who are performing different kind of services, but usually it's a network. Okay, for example, if you want to hijama, you can go to hijama lady of hijama men, as we call them, because it should be performed separately for women and for men, through advertisement, because it's a lot of them in Russia, or you are searching for someone from your community. And usually migrants are searching services provided by migrants, by Tajik, by Uzbeks. So you have like a network and you know who is doing what. For example, we were working with my colleague, with hijama lady. She was performing her services at home, but at the same time, she was working on a marketplace, selling clothes, marketplace Ciepłystan. So it was like that. Also, there are separate places established by well-established migrants. Like, for example, we have also a friend. She's a healer from Kyrgyzstan, and she established her studio together with Russian medical doctor, with someone from Vietnam who is doing acupuncture, and someone from Ukraine who is doing massage. And she combined this kind of traditional Kyrgyz knowledge with adjusting this knowledge to the needs of the Russian market, people from Moscow. So what she's doing, she's also casting stones, but also performing different kind of cleaning body from evil energy. She's also performing different kind of rituals in her studio. But let's say she's like a well-established migrant and her services are quite expensive. Another person who I know is from Kazakhstan. He's a white-collar worker, really middle class, Kazakh middle class. And he's a healer. He's a healer, but he has a very interesting story because he told me that when he was young, he was heavy drunker. He was at Tamada performing like a kind of music during wedding days. But once he was completely drunk, he came to his home and tried to fall asleep. And turned out that he's surrounded by his ancestors, who ordered him, "You should stop drinking and start healing. If not, we're going to kill you." Finally, he agreed, and now he's the healer. He has his studio in Moscow. He has also clients all over the world. Even he's performing his services through Skype. So it's a kind of modern kind of services. And he combined different kind of techniques using, of course, traditional, let's say, spiritual way of healing people from his culture, but also he visited India many times. His, let's say, spiritual master is Sai Baba, and he used also kind of, technique he climbs to learn from India. He has in his studio different kind of symbols, like a portrait of Sai Baba. He have like a very big kobus. Kobus is a traditional instrument from Kazakh culture. He has also different candles, different kind of pictures of spiritual being, like animals. So very syncretic. But basically, people use hijama. Among migrants, it's very popular, hijama healing. And they use, of course, clairvoyance and Ruqya reading. Ruqya reading is very popular. Ruqya reading is like a healing through Quran, through reading surahs. And it can be kind of psychological healing, but also through Ruqya, they expel jinns, expel evil spirit. And also I observe in Moscow those kind of practices.
Okay, it looks like a variety of different influences, different cultures being mixed together. tell me, where do those practices come from? Are they somehow rooted in pre-Islamic beliefs, or are they rooted in some, I don't know, New Age thinking? Or, as you mentioned, some of them are rooted in Islam? Like, how can we categorize these kind of beliefs?
How we can categorize them? I think that we can divide them into those kind of traditional, in inverted comma, practices from Central Asia performed many centuries. Okay, plus we have like ruqya reading, very Islamic practice, reading Quran with purpose of healing. Plus we have very modern, let's say, influence, like in the case of this person who I described from Kazakhstan, who is using different kind of techniques. However, we have to think about it now that we are living in a global world. Even if we claim that something is traditional, Central Asia traditional, that is rooted in Central Asia culture, we don't know. No, in fact, no origin of those practices exactly in which century they came from, how come they appear in this particular place. Okay, there is I think, very deep research on each practice. We can conduct very deep research, and we can conduct this research, for example, through poetry. Because in the case of some rituals which I researched among women, they were poetry read during rituals. So through this spiritual poetry, we can also trace the origin of the ritual, like in a Sufi traditional poetry, in this way. Okay, we can search in a different way, like to see similarities, compare the regions. So I think this issue is very complex.
And how about those practices that are connected with Islam? How do the practitioners, so the healers, the people who use Islam in their practices, how do they interpret their role, and how do they understand Islam? Because as I can imagine, not everyone in Central Asia agrees that these are Islamic practices.
Of course, as I mentioned before, modernists, I call them modernists, also not very proper way, but let's say modernists, Islamic modernists, they refused most of those practices, claiming that they are shirk, which is a very serious accusation, is adding to the side of God other spirits, or bid'ah. So they absolutely refuse many of those practices. Like, for example, there is a certain surahs in Quran, even which are very explicitly telling that those kind of practices, like fortune telling, are forbidden. However, let's say Islam allows for a certain practices, like a ruqya reading, and this is performed by people who consider themselves as a proper Muslims. But it's a very popular ruqya reading. It's almost everywhere. You can meet like a religious specialist who read surahs of Quran to heal people. Plus, what is very popular is a hijama, about which I talked just a while ago. So this like a cupping therapy, which supposed to purify body from evil and bad energies, kind of thing, which can heal different kind of body depending in which part you put cup. You have big books describing in where you should put a certain cups to heal a certain thing. I don't know if I answer for your question, because it's very difficult to say what is Islamic or not in Central Asia. It's another big discussion.
Of course. But let's turn to the state then, because these kind of practices obviously have been quite popular in Tajikistan, for example, and yet the Tajik government has been fighting against these kind of practices for a while. Recently, they banned performing of these kind of practices, whether it's fortune telling or any other form of witchcraft. But now they also want to penalize people who use the services of different fortune tellers and clairvoyants. Where does it come from? Why the state is so against these kind of practices?
First of all, Tajik state and President Rahmon, they are paranoid about Islam, okay? Islam and religion is, I think, one force which can remove them from power. And they persecute Islam and religious practices, including spiritual one, for many years. This is kind of politicizing those practices. And the purpose is one, to control society. Those ban on clairvoyance and different kind of spiritual practitioners started in 2015 after the Islamic Party of Tajikistan was dissolved. They imposed ban on activity of many religious leaders. They start persecuting them. So many people who perform spiritual healing, some people stopped, some people they performed them still, but they were aware of the circumstances. But now they try to impose the law on clients. So the same, controlling society, being paranoid about influence of spiritual leaders. And we have to remember the Tajik state has a different absurd ideas, for example, imposing a special kind of, in inverted comma, traditional Tajik outfit on Tajik women, okay? So you can't wear hijab, but you also can't wear European clothes, okay? You have to be dressed in a traditional Tajik dress.
And do you think that religious leaders, or we can call them, or traditional leaders or clairvoyants, do they have a big influence on society? Like, what sort of role traditionally they play in their communities?
In general, religious leaders and spiritual leaders, they have great influence in Central Asia. They have really great influence on people, and they enjoy respect. So they can also express political view, we have to remember, and they used to do in the past very often. So that is why now also Rahman and his group, they simply afraid of them. And it's not only persecution of, innocent clairvoyant from poor village, who is not very well educated, but has an influence on people because she or he is clever simply. But it's persecutions imposed on people like Sufi leaders. It was many years ago, 10 maybe. It was kind of scandal in Tajikistan. It was a very famous Sufi leader. He was very famous among people. However, he did not enter politics. He simply had a very big authority, and people respected him. He was living in a remote region alone, and he was imprisoned and simply killed, Sufi Timur. So those kind of cases are very often in Tajikistan, unfortunately.
You also did research on the role of female religious leaders in the Fergana Valley. Can you maybe talk a little bit about that? What sort of roles these kind of women play in their communities, and whether they are closely connected to Islam, or whether it's also like a version of Islam that is not necessarily supported by the state or by very strict Islamic leaders?
It's again, very complex question because, before persecution in Tajikistan, they were very popular and they were like a traditional female religious leaders, let's say Bibi Tun, Otuncha. They were very popular and they performed kind of Islamic teaching plus traditional rituals, including some of them healing. Not all of them, but some of them perform healing. And fortune telling as well, but very rare. But it is possible. But nowadays we have, first of all, we have internet. Very often people perform sermons or teaching through internet. we have modernists who refused absolutely those kind of traditional religious female readers like Bibliotun, Biblioi. They refuse their authority. They are modern type of teachers. They're trained in madrasa everywhere, in Egypt, in Saudi Arabia, in Turkey. So I think it's a something which needs like a constant research. For example, in Kyrgyzstan, it's very popular, like a female teaching. There are some in the south of Kyrgyzstan, some traditional, let's say, otincha, but most of them in Kyrgyzstan, there are modern type of Islamic teachers, and they obviously, many of them, they enjoy authority among women. In terms of healing, I came across during my research really those kind of women who perform healing. But this is, let's say, colloquially speaking, old club. Bigger group are modernist. Modern women who really refuse these kind of traditional practices. They even sometimes are ashamed of them. And they learned Islam from various sources, including internet. We have now internet. Many of them paradoxically learn Islam in Russia, in Moscow, attending Islamic University on different kind of circles, official circles attached to the mosques in Russia. Some of them travel to Iran, to Egypt. So we have big group of modernists, and I think they are overwhelming those traditional group. In terms of, for example, Kyrgyzstan, this Islamic teaching performed by women is very popular. Also, very different sources. Usually, women can learn in Kyrgyzstan, in different places, in the madrasas, in hujras, small circles, in Islamic University. But many of them also travel to Turkey. From Russia they learn. So, and internet. Now it's a really big shift because we have internet, and we have also Islamic leaders, not only women but also men, as we know, who teach through internet. They have classes, they have circles. This is really very much developed now.
And what is their relationship to this official Islam, let's say the Islam promoted by the state? Are they also part of this clairvoyant club that Emomali Rahman is against, or are they considered more, part of the religious establishment?
When I conducted research in Tajikistan in 2014, they established official body. They tried to establish official body, which they call Shuroi Bibliotun Ho. So like, let's say, this Council of Bibliotun. Okay? But that was quite a very weak body. They supposed to develop network of, let's say, so-called, in inverted commas still, official female religious leaders who supposed to control rituals performed among women. But they were also very rarely teachers of Islam attached to establishment, but because of teaching Islam is forbidden in Tajikistan. It's really forbidden by law. There is no madrasa which is working there, apart from Islamic University in Dushanbe. So virtually, I suppose that those kind of people disappear. They can play a role, kind of, maybe something like they are shown by some official circles that they are, but in fact, they do not play a significant role.
And what is the approach towards clairvoyance and religious leaders in other countries of Central Asia, apart from Tajikistan? So are they also persecuted, or are they just tolerated as, harmless, let's say, practices that are not religious, but they are somehow rooted in the local traditions?
First of all, we have to start from the time when Soviet Union collapsed. Okay, in Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, there were some associations established to let's say, to gather those kind of healers. Let's say clairvoyant, I don't know, healers performing really very different way of healing. And it was described by Professor Pęka-Lagawęcka from University of Poznań. She's an ethnographer and anthropologist, and she was working in Kazakhstan, also in Kyrgyzstan. And those kind of associations that were quite, interesting bodies because they were registered as NGOs or formal bodies paying taxes. And they became really very popular very quickly. They gained popularity among people. However, many of those people, they work informally, not being associated to any official bodies. And somehow in Kyrgyzstan, it raised the questions that many of those people are simply charlatans, that those kind of services should be controlled because they are harmful for people, because people believe in something which does not exist, or they are cheated by those people who want to simply money from them. That is why there are trials or imposing law, to limit their activities. I heard also that in Turkmenistan they impose some law that claiming that those kind of people should pay taxes, so they should be registered. But I don't know the results, I don't know the results. We know that during Karimov time in Uzbekistan, simply all religious spiritual leaders, they were persecuted almost, So, but we have to remember that in Central Asia, sometimes, things which are forbidden are allowed because, everything is depending on a personal social relation, from which family you come from, who you know. Now, that is why I think that is also in many cases, it works like that.
And if you could divide Central Asia into those areas, or maybe those regions, cities where, these kind of spiritual practices are the most popular, where would that be? Would that be, I don't know, Fergana Valley, or do you think it's like popular everywhere equally? Because, like being in Central Asia, me, for example, I very rarely see these kind of practices and these kind of people. So where to find people who deal with this sort of spiritual services?
You raise good question, because you see that you don't see them, okay? And I think that, if you're in, for example, in Tashkent, in Almaty, in Bishkek, in Dushanbe, and you don't search for those practices, you simply don't see them. If you want to attend some this kind of gathering, or I don't know, to visit clairvoyant, you usually find them very quickly. For example, until those restrictions were imposed in Dushanbe, it was a kind of marketplace next to very big holy place, Mazar Jakub Czarhi, and on each Wednesday, many women came there, and they had they places on a bazaar, literally on the floor, on the and they perform. Each of them perform their services, and they have clients, coming to them. But if you didn't know about it, you'd never find them. So I think the same is in Tashkent, in Almaty. For example, you told me that you don't see those services. I came to Almaty last year. I was in Almaty, and I found out them just, in a few hours. I attended 2 holy places next to Almaty, and I just met many people who perform those healing services there. So I think depending, what are you looking for?
That's very interesting. So maybe from now on, I should start looking for spiritual services. Thank you so much, Anna. That was very interesting. And yeah, good luck in your work. And hopefully, maybe one day you're going to come to Almaty and introduce me to some spiritual practitioners.
Thanks a lot, Agnieszka, for inviting me. And yes, hopefully we can go together, to see someone interesting.
Take care. Thanks a lot.
In Almaty. Thanks. Bye. Thanks.
That's it for today. Thank you for listening, and please subscribe to Turan Tales on Substack. I look forward to meeting you there and on my newsletter's social media.